Well, pressure is again intensifying on Israel after US Vice President Kamala Harris called for a ceasefire in Gaza and rebuked the humanitarian catastrophe there. Opinions on the war are sharply divided in America, Israel's most important ally, a fact laid bare by the death of US airman Aaron Bushnell last week. The 25-year-old set himself alight outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., shouting "Free Palestine" and declaring he would no longer be complicit in genocide. Well, presidential candidate Dr Cornel West stirred up controversy by posting the following to X. Let us never forget the extraordinary courage and commitment of brother Aaron Bushnell, who died for truth and justice. I pray for his precious loved ones. Let us rededicate ourselves to genuine solidarity with Palestinians undergoing genocidal attacks in real time. Well, many Jewish commentators said Dr West's comments encourage political violence by those opposed to Israel's existence. Well, joining me now to discuss his controversial post is the independent presidential candidate, Professor Cornel West. Cornel, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming back on Uncensored.
Always a blessing to be in conversation with you, my brother.
And the feeling is very mutual. Let me just ask you, many people were pretty surprised by the tone of your tweet, not least the fact that you would categorize what Aaron Bushnell did as extraordinary courage and commitment. Many people think it was the act of somebody quite possibly very seriously mentally ill, taking his life in dramatic circumstances, and that was not necessarily consistent with being courageous or committed.
Well, one is that you think of Cato the Younger when he killed himself as the Roman Empire began to emerge and the Roman Republic was collapsing. And Cato's killing of himself has become one of the grand examples of moral courage and a willingness to bear witness as to something that he deeply opposed. Now, I think it's very interesting that so many of the people who were critical of me talking about the courage of my dear brother Aaron, that they don't understand the depths and scope of the suffering right now in Gaza. And too many of them actually are even indifferent to the genocide. They're indifferent to the ethnic cleansing. They're indifferent to the apartheid-like conditions. And so I can understand them saying, well, I am promoting violence by acknowledging the tremendous courage in engage in a moral witness in which you kill yourself as a way of calling attention not to yourself, but to suffering of precious Palestinians in Gaza. That's what Aaron was doing. In the same way Cato was doing the same thing when they saw Julius Caesar moving into the highest position, and it was clear that the republic was coming to a close and the empire was being established.
Okay, but
and there's a whole host of examples of people who bear witness by killing themselves.
Let me ask you this then.
Suicide. No, that's not the point. It's right. The cause that they're bearing witness to. And that's where my difference with so many of my deeply conservative and moderate Jewish brothers and sisters comes in. If they're indifferent to the suffering in Gaza, then it's going to be difficult for me to even have a conversation, because for me, it's a state of emergency. For me, we need that sense of urgency. These massacres are taking place before our very eyes. We ought to be on fire. We ought to be deeply concerned.
Let me ask you this. Would you have said the same thing if this airman had killed himself in this manner outside the Palestinian embassy in Washington, D.C., if there is one, or whatever the central location is for Palestinians in Washington, the day after October the 7th, and reversed it and said, I'm doing this in response to the horror committed by Hamas on Jewish people in Israel? Would you have felt the same way about what happened?
Oh, absolutely. Murder is murder, though, brother. That when you kill innocent people, when you kill civilians, those are crimes against humanity. Now, I have a larger indictment of Israeli apartheid. I have a larger indictment of the Israeli occupation of Palestinians. But anytime any organized group kills innocent people, especially innocent children, I will be in opposition. That's true for US troops. That's true for British troops. That's true for the IDF. That's true for Iranian troops. That's true for Chinese troops. That's true for Indian troops. Any organized army that kills innocent people, especially children, for me is murder. I'm morally consistent in that regard. And that therefore, if somebody kills themselves in order to call attention to the suffering of precious innocent people, especially precious innocent children, I am going to acknowledge that courage and say, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. And I don't mind being morally consistent and therefore having people thoroughly misunderstand me, because I do not look at the world through a narrow set of ideological lens. I try to stay in contact with the humanity of all innocent people and all children, no matter what color, Palestinian, Israeli, Ethiopian, Guatemalan. I fundamentally believe that a Palestinian baby has the same value as an Israeli baby. The problem is, you and I know that if Palestinians were doing this to Israelis, Biden, Harris, Blinken, all of these folks who are enabling this genocide, enabling these crimes against humanity, they would have a very different view because they're not morally consistent. They don't believe that a Palestinian life has the same value as an Israeli life.
Well, I certainly do, but I certainly think
believe that.
I certainly do, but I also believe that the purest definition of genocide is Hamas's view of Jewish people in Israel. They want to get rid of all of them. They've made it very clear publicly since October the 7th that they want to commit that kind of atrocity again and again and again and just get rid of all Jewish people in Israel. That actually is the purest definition of genocide, isn't it?
Well, genocide has to do with intent as well as execution.
But you accept that Hamas are genocidal in their intent?
When Hamas was founded in 1988 as a response to a vicious Israeli occupation, they were wrong. They were calling for the forms of violent resistance that too often did include killing innocent folk, because of course innocent Palestinians had been killed for 75 years by the IDF and others. They did change their charter. There's been struggles within the Hamas itself, and the Palestinian people themselves are, how would you put it? The Palestinian people themselves are resisting with tremendous dignity, and Hamas has emerged as a major institutional vehicle, and that institutional vehicle, for me, does involve crimes against humanity when they kill innocent folk.
Well, they've emerged. I mean, look, let's be clear. Let's be clear. They've emerged as a terrorist organization committing acts of mass terrorism. I mean, that's what they are.
No, Hamas is a counter-terrorist group responding to the terrorism of the IDF and responding to the terrorism of the Israeli state. A counter-terrorist group can commit war crimes, brother, but they didn't initiate it at all. If they're founded in 1988, and the terrorism began in 1948 with the state of Israel, that's 40 whole years.
Yeah,
and let's keep in mind.
Yeah, I think it's a stretch to call them counter. I think it's a stretch with
undermine
respect.
The PLO, undermine secular nationalism, promote fundamentalist Islam as a way of dividing Palestinians. That's why Netanyahu allowed for Gaza, allowed for Hamas to gain access to the money from Qatar and others.
Yeah, I agree.
To keep the Palestinians divided and therefore not having to move to deal with the suffering
Dr. West, there are
Palestinians.
many things that we would find agreement on about the way Palestinians have been treated for a very long time. It has been a completely unacceptable occupation.
Well,
it should not have dragged on. But hang on. Let me finish.
Vicious,
I know.
ugly.
Let me finish. But the idea that you categorize Hamas after October the 7th as counter-terrorists is ridiculous. They are terrorists, and they should be called what they are. Anyway.
But let me ask you this. Do you think the IDF is terrorists when they kill innocent Palestinians? Do you believe
I think it depends.
Yes or no, my brother? Yes or no?
Well, okay, I would ask you this. If you
yes or no? Yes or no?
Hang on.
You're uncensored. You're uncensored,
yes,
my brother.
And I've been asked this question before. I have actually tweeted in 2014, I tweeted that what Israel was doing then was bordering on terrorism. I'm not afraid of using that analogy.
Bordering on terrorism?
Yeah, but hang on.
The children are being killed, brother.
Yes, of course. There were children killed on October the 7th. I have serious misgivings about what's happening currently in Gaza, like most people. But what I would say to you, if you were the head of the Israeli government on October the 7th, out of interest, what would your response have been to that horrendous terror attack?
Well, I'll tell you the answer to that question, but I don't know why you just can't say the IDF is terrorists, killing innocent people, bordering on it's wrong. No, why you're uncensored. You're a free man. Tell the truth from your soul.
I am telling the truth.
Let me tell you what I would do if I was in Israel. I would end the occupation. I would end the siege. I was saying I'm committed to Palestinian dignity. I'm committed to Palestinian equality. And we Palestinians and Israelis, we Jews and Palestinians, we're going to learn how to live together in the context of equality and dignity. We're going to have Jewish safety. We're going to have Jewish security. That's the very end and aim of Israel. We'll never see an annihilation of Jews. We'll never see another massacre or Holocaust of Jews, but we'll never see annihilation and massacre and vicious attacks on Palestinians either. That's what I would do.
Well, on that,
not just as head of Israel. That's what I'll do in the White House, brother. That's what I'll do in the White House. And I'll explain to American people why it is that Biden and Harris and others continue to enable this genocide. And then when they finally say ceasefire, they act like we ought to give them a moral prize or something after 30,000 precious people have already been killed.
Yeah, listen, there's a lot that you say that I agree with, just to be clear, okay?
No, I hear you, I hear you.
Okay, I just want to read you what Ben Shapiro said about your tweet, though, about Aaron Bushnell. He said, our political environment is facilitating dangerous insanity. It is easy enough for people like Cornel West to celebrate the pseudo-heroism of disturbed people lighting themselves on fire, but both the mentally disturbed and our society pay the price for such celebration. I mean, he has a point, doesn't he? You wouldn't want other people to go and set fire to themselves and kill themselves like he did, would you?
Brother, I have deep libertarian sensibilities. I believe that people make choices and they have to take responsibilities. They make decisions, they have to deal with the consequences. I do not promote people killing themselves, not at all. But people do a number of different things. I would want to ask Brother Shapiro. He's talking about there's heroes in the Israeli Defense Forces, many of whom are killing innocent children. Do I think that's sick? Yes, that is morally bankrupt. It is spiritually empty. It is ethically vacuous. I come right back at Shapiro. Your heroes happen to be engaged in terrorist activity against Palestinians. And you're going to say, Aaron's not a hero. Aaron is a particular person who exercised a certain kind of witness and ended up taking the form of killing himself in order not to bring attention to himself, but to try to give some sense of urgency for a genocide.
Do you believe Aaron Bushnell?
That's what Brother Shapiro doesn't want to focus on.
Do you believe
Shapiro still wants to hide his indifference to the suffering of Palestinians in the form of attacking me?
Okay, let me ask you.
How cowardly can you get, my brother?
Do you believe that Aaron Bushnell is a martyr?
Well, martyr and witness really have the same root, as you know, in the Greek. And martyr means someone who pays an ultimate cost tied to a higher cause. I believe trying to bring attention to genocide and bring genocide to a close is a higher cause. And I believe that his actions was trying to bring attention to that higher cause. So yes, he is a martyr, absolutely.
Dr. West, always good to talk to you on Uncensored. Thank you very much.
It's always a blessing. Stay strong, my brother.
Well, joining me now to debate all this is legal scholar and author of War Against the Jews, Professor Alan Dershowitz, and the leader of the Palestinian National Initiative, Mustafa Barghouti. Well, welcome to both of you. Alan Dershowitz, your response there to Dr. West, in particular, his categorization of Aaron Bushnell as a martyr for setting himself on fire and taking his own life in protest of what he said was the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza.
If anybody is going to be a martyr, they should take their lives in protest of Hamas using precious children as human shields, using a child as a human shield, putting a child, a hospital, a school, a mosque, over Hamas fighters and tunnels and other weapons that are used to kill precious Jewish children is the major reason why so many civilians, particularly so many children and women, have been killed. By the way, there is a lower ratio of civilians to combatants that have been killed in Gaza than in any modern warfare, according to even the Hamas statistics. And if you compare them to the number of combatants who have been killed, the ratio is approximately 1.5 to 1, which is much lower than the 3 or 4 to 1.
The problem with that analogy is that when you actually get into the statistics, and let's accept this is the Palestinian Health Authority, it's Hamas run, but the numbers have not been challenged as being, wildly inaccurate by any other body. But more.
I'm accepting them for the moment. Yeah.
So more children have been killed as a percentage of civilian deaths than any other type of conflict of this nature in modern times. And the reason for that is that Gaza has 2 million people, of which 1 million, just over half, are under 18. So it's become de facto a slaughter of children. That's the problem.
Well, remember that Gaza, that Hamas, counts anybody under 19 as a child. Hamas recruits children between the ages of 13 and 19 to be terrorists. So
you
many
can't buy a beer.
Women,
Alan, you can't buy a beer in many American states if you're under 21. So the definition of what is a child,
But a 19-year-old is not a child. A 19-year-old with a gun pointed at an Israeli who was shot is not a child. A woman who was throwing a bomb at Israelis is not a child. Remember, too, that my dear friend Cornel also said that the terrorism by Israel started in 1948. In 1948, Israel was prepared to accept the two-state solution in a tiny little state, and they were attacked by all the Arab armies, and they fought in self-defense. But Cornel West revealed his bias against Israel by suggesting that Israel's terrorism began when it fought for its own independence. And essentially, he's calling for the end of Israel if he's saying that its illegitimacy started in 1948. And the idea that Israel is committing genocide when it has actually done everything in its power to minimize civilian casualties in the face of Hamas doing everything in its power to maximize civilian casualties. Israel should do more, and the United States should pressure Israel to do more. And Israel has done more. The number of civilians killed in the last month is far less than in previous months because Israel is now in a position where it can take more refined action, more specific actions. Their criticism is valid, but calling Israel genocide, a word coined to describe the murder of 6 million innocent Jews in gas chambers, is a form of Holocaust denial. And it's an absolute disgrace to use that term, genocide, against a country that's simply trying to defend itself from a recurrence of October 7th. What Israel is doing is what America has done, what Great Britain has done, what France has done, but only Israel is called genocide.
Okay, let me just play a clip before I come to you, Mustafa Barghouti. A clip from Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States. This was overnight.
Given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
So, Mustafa Barghouti, we'll come to what she said there about a call for a ceasefire, but in response to Alan Dershowitz, there's a real debate raging about whether what is happening in Gaza constitutes genocide. What is your view?
Well, I am not surprised at all, Mr. Morgan, that Mr. Dershowitz, your guest, is defending the murderous Israeli army because he's famous for defending murderers in American courts. I think he's used to that. He's even famous for defending sex traffickers like Epstein. And of course, he will defend those who are committing genocide.
Can we get to the point instead of having ad hominems about
I have to say,
let me,
Mr. Barghouti, I have to say,
let me answer.
Lawyers defend people who they often may personally have serious issues with. There's nothing unusual about a lawyer.
I've defended Palestinians. I've defended terrorists. I have defended people from Hamas. I've defended,
Yeah, well, you can finish, but if you're going to go ad hominem, if you're going to attack him for defending bad people, we're going to be here all night. So stick to the question.
I would even defend you. I would defend your right to make the lies that you've said.
If you don't want me to speak, can you shut up so that I can speak? Shut up, please. I want to say that what you see in Gaza now is an act of genocide because 12,000 children have been killed. And these are not 19 years old. These are 5, 6 years old and 3 years old and 2 years old. These are children, for God's sake. I am against the killing of 30 Israeli children, which happened on the 7th of October, because they are children and civilians. But nothing in the world could justify, because of the killing of 30 children, the killing of 12,000 other Palestinian children. That is unacceptable. You should look at the real figures. 30,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed, and 72,000 people have been injured by the Israeli murderous army. This is 4.5% of the population. Hold on. I did not interrupt you, so shut up and let me finish. 4.5% of the population of Gaza have been killed or injured. If that had happened in the United States of America, you would be talking about 12 million people killed or injured in 4 months of time. Is that acceptable? And mostly civilians, 70% are civilians. More than that, Israel is killing Palestinians not only with this terrible genocide, with their bombardment, they are killing Palestinians with starvation. This terrible siege, 50,000 pregnant women, Palestinian women, don't find a place to give birth in. 64,000 breastfeeding women cannot help their babies. And more than that, 700,000 people are now starving because Israel is preventing milk, flour, food to the population of Gaza City and the north of Gaza. And more than that, they shoot the Palestinian hungry people when they are trying to get some food.
Okay, Mr.
They shoot
Barghouti,
them
let
and
me
kill
ask you,
them like they did 2 days ago.
Mr. Barghouti,
by
let me ask you a question.
100 people and 860 others were injured. So my response to you, yes, this is genocide. These are 3 war crimes happening at the same time. Genocide, collective punishment, and ethnic cleansing. At the same time, 70% of all homes were destroyed. All universities were destroyed. 30 hospitals out of 36 hospitals were destroyed. 347 of my colleagues, medical doctors,
right, Mr. Barghouti, let me just ask Alan Dershowitz. Let me just ask you this.
So what is that if it is not genocide?
Alan Dershowitz, you can respond, but I want you also, Alan, just quickly, I want to also mention again Kamala Harris calling for a 6-week ceasefire. This is what is being negotiated, but Hamas can't even apparently say where the remaining hostages are, which seems to be a massive barrier to any potential deal here. So, first of all, your reaction to that, and then respond to Mr. Barghouti.
Well, I think the deal is on the table. Israel has accepted it. The Hamas has refused to give the names of the hostages, and if they would give the names of the hostages, we could have a deal. I want to ask Mr. Barghouti if he wants to talk about another war crime. Are you prepared now to condemn Hamas for using children as human shields, for using women as human shields? Are you prepared now to condemn that war crime?
This is a lie.
They don't. You deny
it's a lie. It's
everybody in the world is wrong.
They don't hide behind children.
It's not true. They don't use any human shields.
It's a lie. You are repeating. I don't. You ask me, I will answer you. You don't want me to answer your question?
It's a lie. There's no human shield. They never use the human shield, ever, huh?
No, it's a lie because it is. Let me answer. It is an Israeli propaganda. And if you look carefully, and you are a famous and well-known lawyer, I don't doubt that. But I want you to look at the facts. For me, Anna Frank, the little Jewish child who was killed by Nazis, is not different from Hind Rajab, who is a Palestinian child, 6 years old, who was stuck in a car with 6 of her family members killed by the Israeli tanks, screaming and asking for help. And instead of helping her, they bombarded the ambulance that came to help her and killed her.
You're not answering the question. Do they use human shields or not?
Anna Frank and Hind Rajab are the same. No. What human shield? She was in a car surrounded by tanks.
I'm not talking about
and the
her.
Israelis killed
I'm talking about
For me, she's a victim
of children
of same Nazi behavior
I'm not
that
disputing
killed
that.
Anna
You're
Frank.
changing the subject.
You should start to see
You're
us.
changing the subject.
No.
Mr. Barghouti, okay, let me ask you a question. Mr. Barghouti, let me ask you a question. Mr. Barghouti, you say that the Hamas never used civilians as human shields. In which case, why do they build this labyrinth of tunnels around schools and hospitals and all the places where civilians are going to be? Why would they do that?
No, the question is not like that. The
But that's
question
my
is
question.
why Israel continued
That's
to
my
put
question.
Gaza, which is only... Wait. Gaza is only... Wait a minute. Gaza is 140 square miles with 2.3 million people. Where should people go?
Why do
Gaza
they build?
was
Why
besieged
does?
for
No, hang on,
17
you're
years.
avoiding my question.
Besides
why
the
does
fact
Hamas,
that it was
why does
occupied
Ha-
for such a long
Please,
time.
let me repeat
Where
the question.
would they go?
Let me
How
repeat
could they
let
fight?
me repeat
With
my
Israeli
question.
airstrikes that
Mr.
are
Barghouti,
killing them
don't
around the
shout
clock?
over me.
I mean, you're asking
Don't-
them...
I'm
You're asking me
you,
a question. No,
I'm asking
let me
you
answer.
why.
If you don't,
if
ask
Hamas,
the question, and I
please
will
let
wait
me
for
ask
you
the
to
question
finish
again.
your question.
If Hamas does not want to use civilians as human shields,
Please.
why do they build tunnels around schools and hospitals?
First of all, you are again, Mr. Morgan, you are again repeating Israeli propaganda.
It's not propaganda.
They
We've seen the
claimed
footage.
that hospitals were built, that tunnels were under hospitals. Wait, let me finish. You asked the question, let me answer. It's not true what they say. And yes, they built tunnels to hide from Israeli airstrikes, of course, like Vietnamese built tunnels to hide from American bombardment in Vietnam. It's the same. But to say that they are taking people, civilians, as hostage, as shields, is not true. Wait a minute. I see Hamas fighters on Al Jazeera network attacking Israeli tanks with very little weapons. I don't see them hiding behind the people.
I have proof that I'd like you to listen to. I have
this is one way.
Let
It's one way of Israel
let
to
Alan
justify.
Dershowitz speak, please, Mr.
Justify
Barghouti.
the killing of
Mr.
civilians.
Barghouti, let Alan Dershowitz respond.
Unacceptable.
Let Alan Dershowitz respond.
Okay. Here is in my book, the War Against the Jews.
I don't
In it,
interrupt you.
I quote directly from a leader of Hamas praising the use of human shields. He says, "We regard our women and our children as martyrs. We use them as human shields." This is Hamas bragging about the use of human shields.
Who said that?
bragging why
Can
they
you tell
will
me his
not
name?
allow civilians. It's in the
Can you
book.
tell me
You'll
the
get
name of this person?
I will send it to you. I can't find it this second.
Tell me
but
the
it's
name.
there. And not only that, I will send it
because
to
it's
you,
not
and I
true.
will give you a copy
You can't
of the
find
book.
the name because
But
it
wait a
doesn't
minute.
exist.
And that's why Hamas
You're just
doesn't
repeating
allow
Israeli
civilians
bad propaganda.
into the tunnels. If you want to wait a few minutes, go off the air. I will find out the name and I will
Okay,
give
let
it
me
to
ask
you.
Alan,
It
let
will
me
be
ask
a familiar name.
Alan Dershowitz,
and
let me
it
ask
appears in this book.
Alan Dershowitz, let me ask
I-
Alan Dershowitz. Let me ask a question, Alan Dershowitz. This idea of a 6-week ceasefire, I think most of the world now wants Israel to stop bombing Gaza. Do you agree that it's time for a proper ceasefire, which allows proper humanitarian aid to get in? And do you think this has now gone on long enough?
I think, first of all, humanitarian aid should be allowed in under all circumstances. All the openings should be allowed. All humanitarian aid should come in. Second, I agree with the American and British plan for a 6-week ceasefire, coupled with the release of hostages, naming all the hostages, and perhaps moving toward a longer ceasefire. I'm not in favor of continuing the war unless it has to be done. But Hamas has to be disabled. It cannot be allowed to return. That's also part of American policy. That's also what Kamala Harris said. And I agree with what she said generally, but it has to be part of a return of hostages, and it has to be a mutual ceasefire. Yesterday, it was announced by Islamic Jihad that Ramadan will be the bloodiest month, that there will be more terrorist attacks during Ramadan. You can't have a ceasefire on one side, which happened. October 6th, there was a ceasefire on one side, and Hamas violated it.
Okay, let me
if
bring
there
in-
is a genuine, peaceful ceasefire on both sides, then I could agree with
Mr.
that.
Barghouti,
Yes.
two questions for you to finish here. One is, do you agree that Hamas should hand over all the hostages first? And secondly, do you agree that there can be no future for Palestinians with Hamas in charge?
Well, first of all, yes, I will answer your questions, but let me tell you something.
No,
that
please
is
answer my
repeated
questions rather
frequently on
than
your
do something
show.
else.
They keep repeating. No. Let me finish, Mr. Piers
Just
Morgan.
answer my questions, please.
They keep repeating statements that Palestinians said that, a Palestinian said that, but the reality is that it is the Israelis who are doing the crimes, who are killing
Well, actually,
the
Hamas
Palestinians.
committed.
Now,
Hang on.
the response to your question.
Hamas committed.
Yes.
Hamas
all
committed.
Israeli prisoners.
Hang on.
Or
Let
Israeli,
me respond. Hamas
No,
committed.
let me answer the
Hamas
question.
committed. Let me just respond to that. Hamas
let me
committed.
answer first
let
your
me
question,
just finish.
sir.
You wanted to make a point. I'm making a point.
Let me answer first
Hamas
your question,
committed
and then
one of
you
the
can
worst
respond.
terror attacks in history, and when they did it, they brazenly boasted about it on their phones and videos and put them out to the world. They were so happy and proud of what they've done. So let's not be under any illusion about what Hamas are about. But those two questions to end, please. Should the hostages all be released? Should the hostages all be released immediately?
Because,
and secondly, should
I don't
Hamas stay in
agree.
power?
First of all, you keep repeating Israeli propaganda. It's
Just
your business.
answer my questions,
But
Mr. Barghouti, please.
You accuse Palestinians of being terrorists. Let me answer.
Yeah, Hamas are
George
terrorists.
Washington was accused of being a terrorist because he fought for the independence of the United States. Nelson Mandela was put on American terrorist list for a very long time. Martin Luther King was accused by racists of being a terrorist. Sinn Féin party, which struggled for the liberation
Can you
of
answer my
Ireland,
questions?
were also accused of being terrorists. But nevertheless, I'll answer your questions. Yes, all Israeli prisoners must be released in exchange of all Palestinian prisoners who should be released, including a relative of mine that I told you about before, who has been in Israeli jail for 42 years. Including hundreds of Palestinians today,
but the Israeli, with respect, Mr. Barghouti, the Israeli hostages,
all of them have to be released.
The Israeli,
on the other question,
the Israeli hostages, just to be clear, the Israeli hostages are hostages, not prisoners. Just to be clear, but go on.
No, they are prisoners of war because they are fighting in Gaza, and they were caught while they were I agree with you that civilians are not prisoners, that's for sure.
Right.
But Israeli soldiers are prisoners of war.
All those civilians were innocent civilians
equally. Now,
and
on
are
the second
kidnapped
question
hostages.
about Hamas.
Yes.
The second question about Hamas.
Yes.
You keep answering me. I don't know
No,
who's answering
I want you to
who.
answer that question.
You should ask
Should
questions
Hamas
and
stay
not
in
give
power?
answers, Mr. Morgan.
Should Hamas stay in power?
No, give me the right to answer your question.
If you answer my
Hamas
questions,
does not want to
I would
stay
be
in
really
power.
happy.
They declared that. Hamas does not want to stay in power, but you have to understand, we, the Palestinians, will struggle in every possible means to be free from occupation, from apartheid, from oppression. It's the right of the people who are oppressed to struggle for their freedom. It was an American right for those who struggled against British colonialism. It was the right of Martin Luther King to free African Americans. It was the right of Nelson Mandela, who struggled to end apartheid in South Africa.
Okay.
We need to be free from
Let Hamas follow Martin Luther King.
And ethnic
Let
cleansing.
Hamas follow Martin Luther King's path, and there will be peace. If Hamas follows Martin Luther King's path,
I am following him, and you know I am following him like I do.
And stops using terrorism.
I am following Martin Luther King's best strategy.
There will be peace. As a leader
when
of Israel
Israel
once
stops
said,
being a terrorist country.
If Hamas were to lay down its arms, there would be peace. If Israel were to lay down its arms, there would be the kind of genocide that we saw begun on October 7th. Israel wants peace.
So
They've
you
always
say that
wanted
Israel
it since
has the right to keep
1948.
killing us.
No, Israel is the right of self-defense.
No, I
as the
want to
American
correct you
government
on
has said.
1948.
Okay, I can't go back to 48 again.
This thing.
We've run out of time. I'm sorry.
1948.
Mr. Barghouti.
No. 1 minute.
No, we've run out of
Allow
time.
me to respond to what he
I
said.
will get
if
you
allow
the
me.
name.
Just one sentence.
I will get you both back on again.
Hamas leader.
I will get you
Israel
both back
never
on to debate
accepted-
the history of this
Israel
conflict.
never accepted the partition plan.
Okay.
You should go and read history properly.
Mr. Barghouti,
Israel never accepted
we
the
will
partition
debate the
plan.
history.
These are not my words.
We will debate the
This is what
history.
Avi Schleim, the Israeli historian,
Barghouti,
reported.
We will debate the history
Avi
another
Schleim
time.
said he digged very deep
Okay.
and couldn't find a single
We've run out of
document
time.
that
I have to
shows
leave it
that
there. I'm
Israel
sorry.
accepted
I have the
partition
name.
plan.
I will give it to you. I don't have an index in this book.
Okay.
I will give you the name. I will give you the exact quote, and you will then have to apologize to me. Is that okay?
You have to check whether he is really Hamas or not.
I have to
Probably he was an
apologize
Israeli,
because
disguising
the
himself.
studio is about
Because
to be
Hamas
taken.
doesn't ever use human shields.
The
Hamas
studio-
doesn't use human shields. You're
Gentlemen,
willing to rest
I have to
your
leave it there.
credibility on the claim that Hamas never uses human
Okay.
shields and that everybody in the world is
don't-
wrong,
Gentlemen,
including the
I advise
United
you,
Nations.
don't
I have to do a
defend
timeout
the
there.
Hamas
I'm
uses
sorry.
human shields.
The
Fine.
studio-
I'm happy to end this debate on your credibility
Okay.
that Hamas doesn't use human
Then
shields.
we will
Fine.
end it on that debate. Mustafa Barghouti, thank you very much.
Well,
And Dershowitz,
don't
thank you very
repeat
much.
Israeli propaganda,
I appreciate
please.
you both very much for coming on Uncensored, as always. That's it for us. Thank you.